One of the questions that people going through a leadership development journey often ask is, what should I do if even after doing everything I possibly can, I still don't achieve my goals? We're going to explore that question by doing an exercise today. In this exercise, I'd like you to write a story from your life where you didn't get an outcome you wanted, but you really feel that you did everything you could. Let's look at an example of a story like that to give you a sense of what that story might look like.
In 2015, I wanted to create a way to deliver online content to participants or programs so that we could create more sustainability and follow. So we asked a firm that had designed our website if they'd be able to design it, and they said they would. But even though I showed them very clearly what I was looking for, they kept making mistakes. They never used to test the software. Every time they presented me a version, I tried it out, it would always fail. And I wasn't sure what to do. I felt like I've already paid them so much money, invested so much time, I should stick with them and give them some extra time to solve the issue rather than starting again from scratch with a new vendor. But this kept stretching, and after the end of 2 years, I finally gave up. And I didn't even have a really stable login page. I was completely useless for work with clients. So I decided not to sue them to get the money back. I thought it was just going to tie us down in useless legal cases, and I left the idea on the table for a couple of years. Finally decided we're going to develop that capability in-house. It took about a year for our new hire to get to grips with what they had done, and just as he figured out what they'd done and how he could fix it, that's where the coronavirus hit India in 2020. But none of us could do any workshops in person for months, and there was a huge potential demand for online programs. If our vendor had actually done the work, we'd have been completely unaffected, but instead, we lost about 70 lakhs of revenue in just 1 week of cancellations. And every time I think about it, I think, oh.
Okay, now it's your turn to write a story from your life. There are 3 rules to the exercise. 1. The aim is to convince somebody who might read the story that there really was nothing else you could have done. 2. The facts of the story have to be true. So, this is not a made-up story like aliens came and took me away. It's a real story, can be professional or personal. Now, if you pick something that still bugs you today, you'll get no value from the exercise. 3. You don't have to believe that there was nothing else you could have done. You might feel you could have, but you want to write it in a way that somebody reading it would be convinced that there was nothing you could have done. But the facts have to be true. Why don't you pause the video here so you can write the story? You'll get more value from the exercise if you do. Are you still here? Pause and write the story. Okay, so let me continue. I'm going to assume you wrote the story. Now, there are various different ways of telling a story. 2 distinct ways of telling a story that we're going to look at are helpless story and the ownership story. Now, the story you just heard was the helpless story. The bottom line of the helpless story is that there is nothing I can do. Or if it's a story about the past, then the bottom line is there was nothing I could have done. There are usually 3 things we blame when we tell a helpless story. Either we blame other people. He doesn't listen to me, she betrayed me, they don't give me what I want. Or I blame the situation. It was quarter ending, there was no network, or there was a terrible traffic jam. Or we blame ourselves. I can't say no to people. I don't have the discipline to exercise. I can't help losing my temper. But whoever you blame, you lose power. If you blame other people, you feel anger, resentment, betrayal. If you blame the situation, you feel powerless, helpless, fatalistic. And if you blame yourself, you feel guilt or shame or low self-worth. You lose your power whenever you say there is nothing you can do. So what's the alternative? The alternative is the ownership story. You look at your choices of actions and interpretations that contributed to the outcome, but without blaming yourself. A lot of us don't understand ownership. We think ownership means blaming ourselves. And this is what I used to think. I thought if I hadn't achieved my target, then either I blame someone else or something else. And if there's nobody else to blame, then I take responsibility and admit it's my fault. So if my boss asks me, have you achieved the target? I'd say, I don't want to make any excuses. It's my fault for not achieving the target. It's completely my mistake. And I thought she would say, okay, she's taking the responsibility. She's understood her mistake. So she won't say anything to me. But she wasn't buying it. She would say, listen, I don't care if it's your fault. I don't care if it's the other manager's fault. I don't even care if it's my fault. What I want to know is, what do we need to do? See, when I was growing up, my teacher would say, who is responsible for this? And so my understanding of responsibility was, who is the bad person who's done this terrible thing? My boss's definition of responsibility was completely different. It was responsibility. How are we going to respond to this? What are we going to do? It wasn't even about what we should have done or could have done. Because that would still be saying that we should have had the learning even before the event that led to the learning. And that's impossible. It was always about, what are we going to do to fix this? What is our learning? What are we going to do differently next time? Not what we should have done. There's no guilt. What will we do differently next time? That's clarity. Telling the ownership story has nothing to do with blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming your personal power. So imagine you're driving a car and you get lost. Now you can blame other people. You didn't explain the instructions properly. Why did my friend pick a house in such a random location? Or you could blame the situation. The signpost weren't marked properly, the map is unclear. Or you could blame yourself. I'm useless at reading maps. I get this lost every time. Next time you read the map. But ownership is simply, I took a left 2 kilometers back. I need to go back and take a right. That's it. No drama, no blame, just what's to be done. Now let's look at the story you heard just now again. But this time, instead of the helper story, let's hear the ownership story.
In 2015, I wanted to create an online learning management system for Stillwater. There was a web design firm that had created our website, and since they said they could design the LMS, I asked them to go ahead. I didn't invest any time in evaluating any other vendors. It felt like unnecessary admin work. I also couldn't put in any legal clauses in our contract requiring successful completion of work before we would pay, nor did I put in a time frame for completion. I just asked them, can you do it? How much is it going to cost? They said, sure, we can do it. This is how much it will cost. And I said, fine. And that time, I used to think it was fine to run a small firm on the basis of the handshakes. But after 2 years, they still haven't produced a working system, and we lost some money, but more importantly, a lot of time. What I've learned from this is to take more time in evaluating multiple vendors to do a project rather than just pick one I've worked with before. What I've learned is just because a vendor has successfully delivered on one project doesn't mean they have the capability to deliver on a different type of project. What I have learned is that vendors may believe that they are capable of delivering on a project, but it's hard for them to have an objective self-assessment, and so I need to do more diligence to verify their capability. And I've learned in order to make a strategic long-term initiative work, I need to devote more time to it. And that might mean giving up some revenue from doing workshops today. What I realized about myself is that I gravitate towards work I find interesting, like delivering workshops, but avoid work that I find more mundane. But evaluating different vendors, IT or accountants or travel agents is a critical part of running a successful firm. And this work needs to be done as rigorously as we do our training workshops.
Okay, that's the ownership story. Now, what I'd like you to do is to write the ownership version of your story. The same 3 rules apply. The aim is to write the story in a way that someone reading it would say, you've taken ownership. 2, the facts are true. It's the same story. And 3, you don't have to believe that there's anything different you could have done. But you still want to write it in a way that if someone was reading it, they would be convinced that you're focusing on your choices without blaming yourself or anybody else. Now, after you've finished writing the story, please answer the following questions and we'll discuss them in more detail in our next video. What are the emotions you felt when you were telling the helper story? What were the emotions you felt when you were telling the ownership story? Which one is more powerful? What are the subconscious benefits we get from telling the helper story?